Okay, hello everyone. Hello, friends and followers. It is always my idea to, when I post a video, for you to get something out of it, however much or however little, and however little may be just a reference to an author or just, something that doesn't have to be spectacular, but that helps you in some way learn or be more aware something, whatever it might be, big or small. I am preparing uh, several things, and it takes me a little while. Sometimes I want to post a video every 2 days, and I don't always find it possible because what I want to do here is not just a report of what you will hear everywhere else, um, but something. I have to think about what I hear. I have to think about what is going on, and then have some time, some silence, some uh, time for me to think about it and digest it and come up with some sort of, I don't want to say analysis, but something which I can share with you that has, something has produced this reaction in me, and for you to consider that. So it takes me, sometimes I can do it, I can do a video every day, but sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 days. So the idea that I might do one every other day sometimes is not possible. So I'm just trying to be responsible in what I share with you. I don't pretend that it's going to be something, you know, extremely important, but I don't want it to be nonsense and just a waste of your time. So it takes me sometimes a few days more. But today I received in the mail, I was working on something else, but I received in the mail something that I received, I don't know, 3 times a year or something like that. And it's a pamphlet from the Hillsdale College in the United States. It's Imprimis. This is because quite a few years ago, I gave them a donation because I was following some lectures, and I thought I should sort of contribute. And since then, they have been sending me this. It's like you know. Let me see if I can show it to you. It's called Imprimis. It's a little bit of a pamphlet about some lecture or other, okay, that they had at the college. And I thought that as a preamble of what I'm going to cover in videos to come, I should share this with you and read you. It's not long, but it's about Trump, and it's about common sense, and it's called Restoring American Culture. That is the title. We could say European culture too. And it is by Roger Kimball, and the editor of the New Criterion. I don't know him, um, obviously not personally, but I haven't read any of the things that he has published. Um, he is a contributor to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times Book Review, Spectator World, American Greatness, and so on. So he's a prolific writer. Um, See what you think of this. It is a good preamble, as I said, of videos that I will be posting, things that I'm thinking about. So this is what he says. Throughout his presidential campaign, Donald Trump declared that his and his supporters were the party of common sense. In his inaugural address on January 20th, Trump returned to this theme. With his flurry of executive orders, he said, "We will begin in the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense, he said. And in subsequent videos, I will be querying what he's doing, certainly in outside of America in geopolitics. But in any case, he continues, I agree, but what is common sense? At the beginning of his discourse on method, René Descartes, 16th, 17th century, said that common sense was the most widely distributed thing in the world. Is it? Much as I admire Descartes, he continues, I have to note that he was imperfectly acquainted with the realities of 21st century America. If he were with us today, I am sure he would amend his opinion. Because, after all, is it common sense to pretend that men can be women? Or to pretend that you do not know what a woman is? During her confirmation hearings, a sitting member of the Supreme Court professed to be baffled by that question. Is it common sense to open the borders of your country and then to spend truckloads of taxpayer dollars to feed, house, and nurture the millions of illegal migrants who have poured in? I have a problem with the word, this is me, I have a problem with the word migrant. I think is immigrant or emigrant. Migrants are the birds who migrate. But in any case, is it common sense to sacrifice competence on the altar of so-called diversity? To allow politicians to bankrupt the country by incontinent overspending? That is the start of a list one could easily enlarge. In the cultural realm, is it common sense to celebrate art that is indistinguishable from pornography or some other form of psychopathology? Is it common sense to rewrite history in an effort to soothe the wounded feelings of people who crave victimhood? Is it common sense to transform higher education from an institution dedicated to the preservation and transmission of the highest values of our civilization into a wrecking ball aimed at destroying that civilization? Like most important concepts, think of love, justice, knowledge, or the good, common sense is not easy to define, but we know it when we see it. And more to the point, we instantly sense its absence when it is supplanted. In recent years, he continues, indeed, at least since the 1960s, our culture has suffered from a deficit of common sense. That deficit has eroded a great many valuable things from our educational institutions to our cultural life more generally. These days, the revival of common sense is often opposed to the rule of that coterie of bureaucrats the media calls the elites. As a shorthand expression, it makes a certain amount of sense to speak of elites. The folks in Davos who want to vaccinate us into oblivion encourage us to give up steak for insects and keep tilting at windmills to battle the weather. Are members, all those are members of that shiny, self-satisfied group. So are the products of our Ivy and near Ivy League institutions, those whom the critic Harold Rosenberg called the herd of independent minds who all think alike, believe they were born to rule, and occupy nearly every perch upon the tree of societal privilege. But rather than being a true elite, which suggests a quota of excellence, merit, and achievement, the apparatchiks we call the elite are really just the credentialed class. They are often clever and always politically correct. Eddie Hoffer, the so-called longshoreman philosopher who was prominent in the 1960s, was right to observe that self-appointed elites will hate us no matter what we do, and that it is legitimate for us to help dump them into the dustbin of history. Indeed, that exercise in large-scale institutional tidying up is central to President Trump's effort to bring about the restoration of America through the triumph of common sense. It is worth pausing over the word restoration. The dictionary tells us that the verb to restore means to bring back to good condition from a state of decay or ruin. There are essentially two parts to this process. The first is to acknowledge, frankly, the state of decay or ruin for what it is. The abnormal is not the normal just because it is prevalent. For example, the mutilation of children is not gender-affirming care. Anti-white racism is not anti-racism. Illegal migrants are not undocumented new neighbors. A bisected cow in a tank is not an important work of art. The second part of the ambition to restore American culture begins by rescuing vital examples of cultural achievement from the sneering oblivion to which the establishment elite consigned them. As to the first, the state of decay, of ruin, I suspect that we are all familiar with the long march through the institutions and what that brought in American culture and European culture. The phrase is a bit of Marxist jargon popularized in the early part of the last century by Gramsci, I would add. Its basic idea is that the best way to achieve the longed-for revolution is through a process of co-option. Take over a society's schools, churches, and other cultural institutions, marinate them in a broth of liberationalists' ideas drawn from Marx and other left-wing intellectuals, and pretty soon you have taken over the commanding social, moral, and political heights of that society. In a 1973 essay, Utopianism, Ancient and Modern, commentator Erwin Kristol touched upon the conservative indifference to the claims of culture. For 2 centuries, he wrote, the very important people who managed the affairs of this society could not believe in the importance of ideas until one day they were shocked to discover that their children, having been captured and shaped by certain ideas, were either rebelling against their authority or succeeding from their society. The truth is that ideas are all important. The massive and seemingly solid institutions of any society, the economic institutions, the political institutions, the religious institutions, are always at the mercy of the ideas in the heads of the people who populate these institutions. The leverage of ideas is so immense that a slight change in the intellectual climate can and will, perhaps slowly, but nevertheless inexorably, twist a familiar institution into an unrecognizable shape. Crystal was talking more about the humanities than about art, but this point applies equally to the attitude of the elites who manage the affairs of our society regarding art and culture. They did not think or care much about art. It was something that went on, as it were, behind their backs. But then one day they woke up and found the art world, including the formerly staid world of museums, was awash in sexualized garbage, postmodern inanity, and race worship. This process was part and parcel of a larger cultural rebellion against bourgeois values that got going with the advent of modernism. Today, we're living in the aftermath of that avant-garde. All those adversarial gestures, poses, ambitions, and tactics that emerged and were legitimized in the 1880s and 1890s flowered in the first half of the last century and live on in the frantic twilight of postmodernism. Establishment conservatives have done nothing effective to challenge this. On the contrary, despite little whimpers here and there, they have capitulated to it. From the moment Donald Trump was shot at a rally last July, people have been speaking about a shift, a shift in the zeitgeist of American culture. That revolution in sentiment picked up speed with Trump's election in November, and it began barreling down the main line with his inauguration. We always hear about the peaceful transfer of power when a new president takes office. The usual procedure is for the old crowd to vacate their positions while the new crowd slide in to take their places. The institutions remain inviolate, nothing essential changes. Trump's accession was the opposite. He was elected not to preserve the status quo, but to remake it. On January 20th, he moved quickly to show that his administration would not be a colloquy of words only. It would be a locomotive of deeds. Within hours of taking office, he had issued some 200 executive orders and proclamations affecting everything from immigration and the border to taxes and the cost of living. He ordered that the US withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords and the World Health Organization and directed that federal employees return to working full-time and in person. With a stroke of his pen, he obliterated DEI operations throughout the government. The exhibition of energy and self-confidence was extraordinary. Trump has repeatedly said that his common sense revolution would usher in a new golden age. In the context of unleashing the economy and technological innovation, we can understand this to mean literal gold. But a large part of our new golden age will be aggregated under the rubric of normality. The return of common sense is also the return of the normal. What would that look like in the realm of culture? Let me briefly touch upon three examples. One of the most popular and one of the best BBC productions was Civilization, a 13-part series that aired in 1969. Hosted by the eminent art historian and museum director Kenneth Clark, it was a masterpiece of studied deliberateness. Clark ranged widely among the monuments of Western culture, beginning in the dismal barbarian-filled years after the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West and ending with what he called the heroic materialism of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Clark frankly admitted that his cultural itinerary was a personal view, but it remains a refined, well-informed view. What is civilization, he asks in his first episode, standing on the Pont des Arts across from the Louvre in Paris? I don't know, he admits. I can't define it in abstract terms, but I can recognize it when I see it. One of the hallmarks of civilization is its absence of chatter. Clark is a gracious historical guide, but he does not go in for small talk. He is genial, but also serious. An abundance of glorious music often commandeers the audio. Clark says his piece, and then lets the camera pan slowly over the art, architecture, and landscapes that he has assembled for our enjoyment and edification. Throughout, as one reviewer noted, throughout the show, the show maintains a majestically slow pace. Luxuriously long moments where the visuals are completely unencumbered by any commentary whatsoever. Prominent in his first episode is Skellig Michael, the craggy, windswept island off the southwestern coast of Ireland. Named for Saint Michael the Archangel, it was there between the 6th and 8th centuries that Gaelic monks took up residence and helped preserve the guttering embers of Western culture against the rising tide of barbarian invasion. The fragility of that culture is a leitmotif of civilization. The first episode is titled The Skin of Our Teeth. It was by such a slender margin that those monks and a few other scattered groups managed to preserve the intellectual deposit of the West. All the artists Clark's name in his wide-ranging tour are male. Most, if not all, are white. Are these things deficiencies? Today's BBC clearly thinks so. When they broadcast its successor in 2018, they were studiously multicultural and accommodating to feminist sensibilities. One of the three presenters is female. Another hails from Nigeria. When the current King Charles was still Prince of Wales, he said that he looked forward to being defender of the faiths, plural, unlike those fuddy-duddies of yore who styled themselves defenders of the faith, singular. By the same token, the successor to Clark's program was called not Civilization, but Civilizations, plural, to show that no special claims were being made for the West. The original civilization was pitched at a high level. It was also meticulously accessible. The treasures Clark toured were allowed to speak for themselves, and so speak they did. The elites didn't much like civilization, partly because now they found it insufficiently multicultural, partly because they objected to Clark's unstudied air of competence and cultural mastery. But civilization is a good example of what it might look like to restore culture in an age that has abandoned common sense. If it seems old-fashioned and out of date to a generation weaned on social media, special effects, and incessant lectures about the evils of capitalism and the West, that tells us more about the quality of our times than it does about Clark's achievement in this series. Something similar can be said about Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concerts. Bernstein began the concerts in 1958, just 2 weeks after he took the helm of the New York Philharmonic. These marvelous concerts, with commentary by Bernstein, aired on television, first in black and white and then in color, until 1972. Bernstein organized each concert around the theme, the meaning of music, musical modes, orchestration, drawing on the orchestra's current programming for suitable illustrations. In 2005, a new 9-disc selection of the concerts was released, some 25 hours of music and commentary. As with Clark's civilization, there was no small talk. The music was central. Bernstein not only introduced a new audience to classical music, he also introduced a number of fledgling musicians to their future audiences. The pianist Andre Watts was just 16 when he made his debut in 1963 at one of the concerts. Unexpectedly, the Young People's Concerts were a huge popular success in Europe and Asia, as well as in the United States. For 3 years, CBS broadcast the concerts during prime time on Saturdays, and the series eventually garnered more than 20 million viewers. Parents scrambled to sign up their newborns for concert tickets a few years down the road. Despite Bernstein's success as a conductor and composer, some commentators judge this long-running concert series to be his greatest musical achievement. He might have agreed. Looking back on the concerts years later, he said they were among my favorite, most highly prized activities of my life. One can point to other triumphs of cultural common sense from the recent annals of American history. The Book of the Month Club, brainchild of the ad man Harry Sherman, debuted in 1926. Beginning with 4,000 subscribers, the operation grew to nearly 900,000 by 1946. But the club was as much an educational success as a commercial one, to be sure. As described by Sherman, the club established itself as a sound selector of good books and sold them by means of its own prestige. This was true. Subscribers were introduced, however, to novels by Ernest Hemingway, Margaret Mitchell, J.D. Salinger, and John Steinbeck, and histories by Barbara Tuchman and William Shira. Bertrand Russell's History of Philosophy was a Book of the Month club selection, as were two big books by the philosopher George Santayana. The point is that all these initiatives bore witness to a culture at one with itself. It was a culture innocent of the self-loathing that has been such a disfiguring feature of elite American culture since the 1960s. From our perspective in early 2025, it is a culture of common sense, affirmative, forward-looking, and normal. Throughout civilization, Kenneth Clark hailed energy and confidence as hallmarks of a vibrant civilization. In his last episode, he identified lack of confidence more than anything else as that which kills a civilization. The spectacle of Donald Trump's boundless energy and the energy he calls forth from others is heartening. Among other things, it makes us appreciate how his revolution of common sense might not only spark a political restoration, but also a new cultural golden age. That is how the selection of the talk ends. Of course, there is much more to say about what Donald Trump is doing, because one thing could be what he's doing in America and another in what he's doing in the rest of the world. But that is it will be food for another video, or perhaps 2 or 3. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.